good in the 90s. I don't think I think Jeff. We'll talk about this after you're done. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine, because I was going to talk about how apparently at some point Terry Funk was in charge of creative, or he was the GM of WCW.
I remember that.
I don't, and I was like, I need to go back and watch this.
Yeah, Terry Funk was like involved in a match, like several. He was like involved in storylines in 2000 in WCW.
He's still not retired, is he?
I don't think
He's probably going to wrestle until he dies.
Yep.
So WCW was then bought by WWE in 2001, and
guess who the fuck didn't want Jeff Jarrett?
Yep.
The guy who he held up for money.
GONEE gone. Jeff Jarrett is gonzo. So then, a year later, June 20.
Probably after his contract ran out and they stopped paying him.
Oh, I guarantee that's exactly what
or
it was.
Or Time Warner.
June 2002, Jeff and Jerry Jarrett start Total Nonstop Action, a.k.a. TNA. And, of course, he would go on to win the NWA World Championship more times than anybody probably needs to within that certain amount of time. And then he left TNA in 2014. So roughly around 2014, he also made his debut because they had a working relationship with AAA also.
He won their, mega championship.
He did.
Right?
He won their Mega Championship twice. He won their Rey de Reyes, which is their King of the Kings.
And that's a pretty big deal.
That's a very big thing. He won that one in 2004, sorry. And then he would later start. Okay, so it's very convoluted because he's in TNA for quite a while. But then in 2014, he leaves, starts Global.
I think he was technically still
Wrestling.
like a minority.
He
owner
was
in TNA at that point too.
He was a minority owner because Panda, which is what Dixie Carter's daddy owned, based out of here in Dallas, Texas. They were the money behind TNA, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to be the majority." I was like, "Okay, that's fine. I'll be the minority person." So then he left, and then he goes to represent, or he starts Global Force Wrestling, which is literally the weirdest name, and I've heard a lot of dumb names in wrestling, but that's a weird one.
They did do one good thing. They partnered for Wrestle Kingdom 9.
They did, so I'm getting there. So he represented GFW in New Japan, TNA, and other companies. He did join the Bullet Club in 2014 and wrestled only one time at Wrestle Kingdom 9.
At in a 12-man tag match.
Yeah,
or something
it was way too many people. So then he returned to TNA in 2015, but then in June of 2017, Impact acquired Global Force Wrestling, but then in October of said year, Impact terminated their relationship with Global Force and Jeff Jarrett, and then they would then proceed in a lawsuit, which
I think it's still going on.
It wouldn't be surprised. Well, it actually kind of would surprise me if it was still going on, because I feel like Don Callis would be like, "Can we just nip this in a bud, get this out of the way?"
I still think it is, though.
Probably, it wouldn't surprise me. So then Jarrett appeared again at AAA during 2018's Triple Mania 26. Losing his mega title to
and his
Phoenix.
hair,
and his that was a later. That was another
okay.
yeah.
Sorry, that was more recent.
It was. So he lost his mega title to Phoenix in a 4-way with Brian Cage and Rich Swann as well. And then February of 2018, he was announced that Double J was going to be part of the WWE Hall of Fame.
Coming home, getting paid.
And then he was in the 2019 Royal Rumble and has since been hired as a producer and is now a member of the creative team.
I was very happy to see Jeff Jarrett at the Royal Rumble in 2019.
Oh, so was I. And then the week or two after, he was in a feud with Elias. And it worked out perfect.
I think Jeff Jarrett's one of those guys that sometimes he was not that great. Sometimes he was really fucking great.
Yep.
But a lot of times he got much maligned by people simply because he was Jerry Jarrett's kid.
That's so. I think he did get you get that moniker immediately when you're like the promoter's kid. I mean, I'm sure if Shane would have actually tried to be a wrestler, that's what would have happened. But then also he did leave I left it out of here because I didn't really want to go into it. Him and BG James, aka the Roadie, aka Road Dogg, left WWF and held them up for money, and then came back. Or the Roadie came back. He didn't. And then it was just like a weird situation. He had done that twice. So I don't know if it was because he thought he was worth more, or he was just like a promoter's kid. He was trying to figure. I don't know what was going on. But yes, he is a promoter's promoter, and he'll be promoting until the day he dies.
I agree.
Although I've heard he might be taking over NXT, so that could be interesting.
Whenever Triple H...
you mean when Vince steps down soon?
Well, I meant when Triple H takes over.
Oh, yeah.
The WWE.
Without a doubt.
So, talking about those two people kind of segues very nicely into what we want to talk about in the main event of the evening.
Main event of the evening.
You come at the king, you best not miss, is pretty much what I'd like to, think of this as. The WWE, since WrestleMania I, has been the premier professional wrestling company in America.
When people think pro wrestling, they think WWE.
Right. Like when
or WWF, whichever.
When you talk to someone about WrestleMania, they're like, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yep. But if you're like, hey, man, you see Wrestle Kingdom? They'll be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
What's a Wrestle Kingdom? Was The Undertaker there?
So, who came at Vince? Like, from WrestleMania I, who came at Vince? Who tried to be like, we're going to knock you off?
So, it was at first, it was kind of the USWA.
Well, that's like in the 90s. I think it's even sooner than that. I think the territories were the first ones to be like, we're going to fucking take this guy out.
Right.
Because at 1985, he was a national-ish promotion. He was running shows all over America. He had TV shows in most of America. But like there were still big territories, like the Mid-South, Memphis, AWA, Jim Crockett Promotions.
Right.
Those were still very big promotions.
He had a stronghold on the northern part of America.
Yeah, I mean that's where the WWE was based. So
right.
That makes sense.
Well, I mean when everybody says, "Oh, he's going to New York," that meant you're going to WWF.
So I think the territories tried to knock him off early.
Right.
I think there was some work. They did try to work together. There was like Super Clash between Jim Crockett Promotions and AWA, but like it didn't work because those companies were still like, nah, man, fuck you. Like we're gonna do our own thing.
Well, plus by that point, Vince had already like kind of picked everything he wanted, the top guys from these territories, and had him under his contract.
Yeah, I mean, 87, yes, he had a lot. I don't know. There were still big enough stars in professional wrestling in 87 for them. I mean, Ric Flair was with WCW until the 90s.
That's true.
I think there was still enough firepower before the 90s that if those promotions had really, really worked together, I don't know that they would have stopped Vince, but they would have at least slowed it down. Like, I don't think by 1993... or by 1992, like when you think wrestling, you think of WWE.
Right, exactly.
I think you would still have thought of, when you think of wrestling in Dallas, you still think the Von Erichs. When you think of it in Minnesota, you think of the Gagnes, whatever. So I think that they would have, if they had worked together, they could have stopped some of what happened.
Right. But then that was the other problem, is that they didn't want their guys to lose.
Right.
And so if they're doing these super shows, they never thought, or they were thinking how their promotion would look afterwards. They didn't think how the show itself would look. So like if we go to fast forward, if we go to All In, they didn't really give a shit. They gave a shit who won and lost, but they didn't.
It was more about putting on a good show.
Exactly.
I think that's very true. I think you're right. I think like part of what came out of that was AWA being like, no, we don't want our world champion to lose to your world champion, even if it's by count out or whatever. We don't want that to happen because it'll make us look weak. Right. Instead of being like, this show will make all of us better because it will make us all stronger to take on this, jagoff kid who's over here fucking trying to run his dad's company into the stratosphere.
This third generation promoter.
So, but I would say by the 90s, I think AWA tries to make a play in the late 80s. They got that deal with ESPN where they were on TV on the national level.
And that was before ESPN what it is now. So
yeah, that's very true. It was still a cable show, and it was national. It had national audience, but it wasn't like it is today. You're totally
exactly
right.
They were reaching for product. Or for,
they were, and AWA was all too happy to oblige. But like by that point, World Classic going out of business. They weren't quite merged with the AWA yet, but they were getting close to it. Maybe that was 89 actually, because that was when Super Clash 3 was, I think. Anyway, when Jeff Jarrett and Kerry Von Erich had that super bloody match for the unification between the AWA and world class title.
Oh, right.
And that was another one. The USWA. The USWA was probably the last like hurrah between like the world class and AWA to try to really make a go of it nationally, and even that was. It failed.
They're grasping at straws at that point.
It was, and by '95, the AWA was nothing. USWA was not really anything important. Jim Crockett Promotions in the late '80s tries to also make a play for it,
Right, because they were still tied with the NWA.
and I think they made a much better competitor than AWA ever did. Like, I didn't really know about the AWA as a kid.
Well, I also think it's where we are. Because we did grow up in Texas.
Yeah, but I knew I knew what WCW was though.
Well, that's because we're in the South.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. But it's because we had TNT.
Right. Oh, that's true. Also.
It had nothing to do with the fact that like it was because we had cable.
Yeah, if we had TNT, we probably had ESPN.
I watched some AWA episodes on ESPN when they came out, but it wasn't good. So I was like, oh, I'm good. I don't need to watch this. And it was nobody I fucking knew or even cared about. And so when I found like Jim Crockett Promotions and WCW in the late or to the early '90s, I was like, "Oh, this is good.
Yep.
I like these people." Also, Sting reminds me of the Ultimate Warrior.
Well, I found Dustin Runnels, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Me too. I was like, "I know that guy. He was in WWF."
And this was back when I actually had a TV guide, so I actually go through like, "What is going on? We're Saturday." Oh, okay, WCW, got it.
I mean, I think Jim Crockett Promotions, and then it morphs into WCW whenever
exactly.
Jim Crockett Promotions overextends itself. Because to Jim Crockett Promotions' credit, they come up with Clash of Champions to directly counter. It's a brilliant move to directly counter. What was it? WrestleMania 4?
No, I thought that was Survivor Series.
It was one of them.
Yeah.
It was one of their big pay-per-views.
Yeah.
They directly were like, "This is a free program that we're giving away on TV." Pay-per-view caliber, come watch it. I mean, the WWE did the same thing to them too. Whenever they like put out
Saturday Night Main Event.
I don't know if it was that but they did things exactly like that, where they were like, "Oh man, here's this free baller ass shit."
What?
Oh,
You
wow,
get Hulk
there's a
Hogan
pay-per-view?
wrestling on? Yeah.
Weird. So WCW, Jim Crockett Promotions morphs into WCW because they overextended themselves. They tried to go too big, too fast.
Yep.
They talked about. I've seen interviews with people who talk about the time in Jim Crockett Promotions, with them trying to run shows in like Vegas instead of making a smart, slow expansion,
Right.
like going from the Carolinas to Tennessee to Kentucky to Iowa. You know, like to make that slow, westward expansion.
Like you're Lewis and Clark. You got to rediscover America again.
They were immediately like, let's go to all the cities that we have TV in. And since we're on TNT, we can go to all the cities. But, like, who the fuck knew them in Seattle?
Well, that was the unfortunate part, was that at that time you couldn't really go to each city and be like, okay, what's the viewership here? How many people are viewing it?
They did.
Yeah, but not like the caliber you can now. Well, probably not as instantaneous now.
No, it probably was not. That's very true. I would like to point out, around this time, Tri-State Wrestling Alliance is a thing that gets started in '89, and in '92 they changed their name to Eastern Championship Wrestling. Then in '94 they changed their name to Extreme Championship Wrestling, as we have heard about. So at this point, you've got WCW really as the secondary competitor.
Right.
ECW is apparently kind of in the background, starting to make a thing. Nitro begins in '95, which was obviously a big.
They had Lex Luger. How could it not be big?
Well, he did and especially because
he'd
been on that fucking. He was on that fucking in WWE, like I think the same night, right?
I think it was.
Or was that Rick Rude? That was Rick Rude.
That was Rude. That was
but yeah, he was in WWF. Like, for all they knew, he was still working with them, and then he showed up on Nitro on live TV, the first Nitro, and everyone was like, "What the fuck?
What's the narcissist doing over there?
Why is he dressed like in this puffy shirt?"
No joke. Was he French?
Maybe they had to get it at the mall. I left my gym bag in Stanford.
Well, we're at the Mall of America. Go shopping somewhere.
All right, I got a shirt. That's the one.
That's the one you
shirt.
picked. Did we not find somebody to go dress Luger? Please.
Elizabeth, what are you
How much
doing?
time do we have?
Out there and help
He's not killing her yet.
No, but that's how they met. So I think that's a really pivotal moment for WCW, because it's finally a moment where they get to square up and be like, we have a national TV show at the same time as you do. Well, not at the same time, because I think it came on an hour earlier. I think there was 1 hour of overlap.
They did
originally.
Well, that time they did 2 hours too. They didn't extend it 3 hours till later.
Yeah, much later. And then it was all in direct. But it always started an hour earlier than Raw.
Right. And that's usually about the time. Well, what really helped that was the cruiserweights and the